The class this morning is sponsored by Barry and Sharon Schechter in honor of his father, Avram Zalman, then Miriam, who's undergoing a procedure this week, and this is sponsored in honor of his health and his recovery, and you should be successful, and the merit of the Torah that is learned by so many should serve him a good stead, should stand by him and help him to recover and to come out 100% healthy from this. Amen. Amen. Being that this week we're going to celebrate the Yontiv of Chanukah, so I will talk about Chanukah instead of the Parsha, which is the portion of Miketz. Before davening in the class, we gave the class on davening, on prayer, so I zeroed in on the prayer of Chanukah that we say in all the Amidah, every Amidah prayer in the Shemona Esrei, and in benching, and that is the Vial Hanisim. And that's a prayer that is inserted in the blessing of Meidim, which is the blessing of the thanksgiving, and therefore we give thanks for the great miracles that Hashem brought on our behalf in the great miracle of Chanukah. Now, at the end of that prayer, it says like this, after it goes through the whole thing of the great victory and so on, it says, and afterwards your children came into your house, the Beis HaMikdash, and they cleared out your sanctuary, they purified your Beis HaMikdash, and they lit candles in the courtyards, your holy courtyards. So the obvious question is, mentions over here courtyards, and the truth is that the menorah was lit not in the courtyard, but inside the sanctuary. The room right before the Holy of Holies was called the sanctuary, the Heichel in Hebrew. And over there was a table, and there was a mizbeach, and there was a menorah, and that's where the menorah stood, and that's where the menorah was lit. So why in here, in this prayer, does it say that they lit the candles in your court, in the courtyard? So there's an answer that is given by the great Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer was a sage that lived about 200 years ago in Hungary, in the city of Pressburg, and he wrote a lot of halachic works, and he deals with this question. And he gives an original answer. He says like this, that being that the Greeks had defiled the whole Beis HaMikdash, and therefore the inner sanctuary was full of it wasn't purified. So what they did was, for this time, the Kohen brought out the menorah into the courtyard to light the menorah in the courtyard in this particular case, because number one, the rest of the temple may have still been defiled by they haven't yet gotten through cleaning up and purifying everything that needed to be purified after the Greeks had their hands on it. And in addition, there's another side benefit here, that they would light the menorah in the courtyard, because this way the courtyard is open for everyone that wants to come and see it. A Jew, a regular Yid, not a Kohen, a Levi, a Yisuk, anyone can go to the courtyard. So if they lit the menorah in the courtyard, in addition to the fact that they had to light it there because perhaps the inside wasn't yet purified, in this case the miracle would even be publicized better, because that way the people would be able to see the miracle with the light, with the oil and the whole thing. If it was inside the sanctuary, they would, so obviously if the sanctuary was purified, then there's no excuse. They would have to do it in the sanctuary. But because the sanctuary may have still been under the Tameh, So they did it outside, and this way they had the benefit of publicizing the miracle to even more people. The problem is that this doesn't really fit. Number one, it doesn't really fit the language of the Al Hanisim. And I want to read it to you so that you understand why this answer is not faithful to the language of the Al Hanisim. It says over here like this, and in order. After that they came, and how does he translate Ludvir Beisecha? Children, enter the shrine of your house. They entered the shrine of the house, meaning the Beis Hamikdash. Ufinu es heichalecha. They cleared out the sanctuary. V'tiarus mikdashecha, and they purified the Beis Hamikdash in general, which would include the whole Beis Hamikdash. V'hidliku neiros b'chatzris kodshecha. And then they lit the candles in the courtyards, in your holy courtyards. So what we have over here is in order. That they came there, the Jews came after they won the war, and they cleared out the sanctuary. What did they clear it out from? Obviously, they cleaned it out from the impurities of the Greeks, and they made it ready for the service of what you had to do in there. And that was what? That was the Heichel, the inner sanctuary. That was before they purified, and then they purified the whole Beis Hamikdash, and then they lit the candles. So the Chassam Sofer is saying that they did it outside because the inside wasn't yet pure. It doesn't really match with the actual words and the order of how it's written up. So that doesn't really, it's not really a perfect answer because it's not, the words don't support that. The second question is, it says over here, b'chatzreis kodshecha. In plural, it says your holy courtyards. You see, when you take a look, everything else says in the singular. Then your children came to the shrine of your house, singular. They cleared out your heichel, singular. They purified your Beis Hamikdash. And then it says, v'idliku neiros b'chatzris kodshecha, and they lit candles over here it says plural, in your holy courtyards. Now, how many menorahs are there? There's one menorah, and you light one menorah, so it should have said, b'chatzar kodshecha, in the Azorah, which is a part of the temple, which can be considered your courtyard. Why does it say your courtyards in the plural? So that too is a problem. The second question is, the third question, the Chassam Sofer is saying that there's a side benefit by having lit the menorah outside so that all can see. And that's why they did it that way. Well, they didn't wait to clean out the inside. The problem with that is like this. When they lit the menorah the first time with the little bit of oil that was left, no one knew that there was going to be a miracle. No one knew that was going to light for 8 days. That happened after the first day. They saw it's not burning out. So you can't tell me that to begin with, they lit the menorah outside for that reason to publicize the miracles that all Jews can see it, if they didn't even know there was going to be a miracle. They only knew about that a miracle was happening when it happened in actuality, which was after they lit the menorah. There's an interesting debate when they began to see a miracle materialize. Some have the question, by Beis Yosef asks the famous question, why, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, he asked the question, why do we have Chanukah for 8 days? It should be for 7 days. Because 1 day supply, they had 1 day supply. So the real miracle was that it lasted for an extra 7 days, not an extra 8 days. So the miracle really was only 7 days, not 8 days. Why do you have a miracle? Why do we celebrate for 8 days? So there's a lot of answers given for this question, and one of them is that perhaps the miracle really started on the first day, and that only 1/8 of that supply, in other words, the oil, it's not as if the first day burnt up everything, and then it was just burning on nothing. One answer is that supply of 1 day was divided in 8. Every day it burnt up 1/8. So the first day was also a miracle. But even that, that will have to have only be seen after a good few hours when the oil is burning already. But there's no way they could have known that this was going to happen before it happened. So you can't tell me that they lit the menorah in the courtyard so that all Jews see this great miracle that's going to happen. It didn't happen yet, and they didn't know it was going to happen. So the whole answer of the Chassam Sofer begs for clarification. Yeah, you want to answer?
I was going to say, could it just be the simple miracle that they actually found oil from that, and it takes 8 days to create new oil?
So you're saying the miracle was that they found the oil.
They found
Fine,
a little
so.
bit of oil.
But that's not going to be publicized by the fact that they... Oh, so you're saying that they lit the menorah outside, and that's a sign that they found oil. Yeah. So that's interesting. Very good. Yeah.
But it could be a miracle before it happened. Makes that day special and miracle. They didn't know it was going to do that, but it did. Maybe
I understand. The answer to the question of the base of Rabbi Yosef Kairo's that's answered. The problem is that the answer that Rabbi Moshe Sofer gives for this question is not answered. It's not answered because he's saying, why did they light it in the courtyard instead of in the inner sanctuary where it belongs? Is so that all the Jews can see the miracle. When they lit it, there was no knowledge of a miracle that was going to happen. So that can't be the answer.
But that could be a miracle that it came before.
It didn't. What do you mean it came before? What came before?
That they put the menorah with 8 candles in the courtyard before the miracle happened. That makes that almost a miracle.
That they put the candles in the courtyard? What's the miracle of that?
8 candles. They didn't know how long that oil was going to go. It's like...
No, every day in the temple they lit 7 candles. That was not a unique thing. The miracle happened that the 7 candles lit for 8 days on 1 day's supply. They didn't light... In the temple there wasn't... It was always the same amount of candles. 7 candles every day. So that wasn't a miracle. They had enough for 7 candles to burn for 1 day. So the Rebbe introduces an interesting idea, and he says that it would seem more plausible that when the rabbis formulated the Al Nisim prayer, and they wrote over here that they lit candles in your sanctuary, in your courtyards. In fact, they're not even referring to the menorah that was in the heichel, that was in the sanctuary.
Just says they lit candles. Didn't say on the menorah.
Right, no, exactly. It says they lit candles in your in your, in the courtyards. So usually, without knowing, you obviously think it means the famous menorah, that which would the miracle happen with that menorah. What else is it talking about? He says no. It's not talking about that menorah. The menorah that the miracle happened with, they lit inside in the heichel, where it belonged. And in truth, the whole sanctuary was cleaned out, as it says here. In order of happening, it was all cleared out before, and therefore they were able to light it inside. And they had no idea that a miracle was going to happen. That's why there was no reason for them to bring it outside. And they lit it inside. When the Al Nisim is mentioning having lit that, they lit candles, he's not referring to the menorah. He's talking about candelabras that were all over the place to celebrate the miracle. And we find, in general, in Judaism, that when you want to celebrate and thank Hashem for a good thing, for something celebratory, you do it with candles. We do it all the time. And therefore, in the shul, it says you shall light candles in the shul to celebrate and things. In the Shulchan Aruch, you can go, you can see it. The candles is a way of celebration. So it could be, and it's not it could be, but that's what happened over here, that because they were so happy with the great miracle that happened on Chanukah, and even before Chanukah, because they won the war and all that, they celebrate by, in addition to thanking Hashem with prayer and all that, they lit candles all over, and that's why it says in the plural, in your courtyards, many courtyards, because they lit many candelabras. It was lit up. as they find in on Sukkot when they celebrate the Simchas Beis HaSheyeva, when they drew the water for the libation. They made a big celebration in the Beis Hamikdash with what? They lit candles. They would juggle fire. Fire candles is a way of celebrating in the Jewish in the Jewish tradition. So here too, they lit candles, many candelabras. I also mentioned, the Rebbe mentioned somewhere else, that answers also an important question regarding the shape of the menorah.
Yeah.
The shape,
The shape
of
of the menorah. The menorah, Rashi says, and the Rambam says, were the branches came out on a diagonally straight. And in the Arch of Titus, it's clearly rounded.
Different menorah.
Oh, so the Rebbe says that was not the menorah from the Heichel. That was a menorah that they took from the Chaseres Kodshecha. They got a hold of one of those menorahs, and that's what they took, and that's what they depicted on the Arch of Titus. It has nothing to do with the inner menorah. So therefore, he was very insistent that the Jews should stop making this mistake and making pictures of the menorah round if they're depicting the inside Heichel menorah. The menorah in the inner sanctuary was definitely on a diagonal. There's no question. Rambam says it. Rashi says it. They all say it. Yeah. You want to add something?
No, but,
Oh,
that's a you get that asked so often, you know.
Yeah.
The difference, and I've always wondered who says Titus had any idea what one menorah versus
No,
another.
you think the menorah. It's the menorah, right? It's not. But the Rebbe then, and now the Rebbe turns to another question that's very bothersome. If you're telling me, if it turns out that the hidliku neiros, that they lit candles in your courtyards, is not referring to the menorah that was lit on Chanukah with the miracle, then the whole Ala Nisim, which we're thanking Hashem for the miracle of Chanukah, doesn't mention it completely eliminates the whole miracle of there's 8 days that the menorah, the oil burned for extra 8 days. Not a mention of it. It's completely eliminated from Ala Nisim. How could that be? Here we are putting in a whole extra prayer on Chanukah, in our Meidim, in our Thanksgiving prayer, to thank Hashem for the great miracle of Chanukah, and the main miracle of Chanukah is not there. There's nothing I mention about the menorah. It does. If you're telling me that this is not the menorah, then where's the menorah? Why isn't it mentioned in this whole Ala Nisim?
Good point.
It's a very good point. He magnifies the question. When you go to the Gemara in Shabbos, in the Talmud Tractate Shabbos, where it talks about the miracle, the holiday of Chanukah, the Gemara asks, what's Chanukah? And the Gemara answers that there was a whole... In other words, the question is, as Rashi says, I believe, he says, over which miracle did they institute the holiday of Chanukah? And the Gemara answers over there. The Gemara says that when the Jews overpowered the Romans, they came to the Beis Hamikdash and they cleared out everything, and they found a cruse of oil, a little jug, and there was enough oil. There was not tamei; it didn't become defiled. And they lit it, and it was 8 days, and it was a miracle happened. In other words, the Talmud is telling us that what's the great celebration of Chanukah? The whole celebration is the miracle of the 8 of the oil. And in fact, what kind of how do we celebrate Chanukah? We don't make marches in the street to celebrate our victory over the war. We light candles. In other words, the main celebration of Chanukah is the miracle of the oil. So the question now is even more. How could it be that in the Ala Nisim, we're talking about thanking Hashem for this miracle, for this Yom Tov, and the main miracle is gone, is just not there? You understand the question? So in order to understand why this is, I want to take you one step prior, to understand what really happened on Chanukah. So the Greeks came and they fought with the Jews, and in this process they went into the Beis Hamikdash and they defiled everything, and the Jews won, and there was this whole thing. But if you have to really try to understand what was this battle about? What did the Greeks want? What was bothering them about the Jewish people? So we know that in Purim, for example, with Haman, we know what bothered him. The Jewish knows. He hated a Jew. He hated the physical, the fact that Jews are similar to Hitler. He hated every Jew. He wanted to kill every single Jew. That was Haman's hang-up. He wanted to get rid of the Jews. It wasn't so much they wanted to get rid of Judaism. He wanted to get rid of Jews. Whether you were religious, you weren't religious, no Jew should be alive. You have your mother-in-law's Jewish, you should be killed. It was like Hitler. He wanted everyone dead. I don't know if to that degree, but he wanted every Jew dead. The Greeks were not like that. The Greeks had no beef with the Jewish people. In fact, it says in other sources that they kind of liked the Jewish people. They had as respect for the Jewish culture, Jewish wisdom, even the Torah wisdom. They had an appreciation. They were people of high culture. They were cultured people like other cultured people. And they had no problem with Jewish culture. They had no problem with the Jewish people, and they had no problem even with Jewish customs and practices. What bothered them, as it says over here also in this Al-Hanisim, if you take a look at the words which are precise, as everything in Torah is precise, it says over here that the kingdom of the Greeks rose up against your Jewish people, to make them forget your Torah and to make them violate the decrees of your will. In these words lie the key as to what the Greeks wanted. They wanted, to them, the idea of a Torah that was super rational, that was purely godly, and had no explanation. And the only reason you do it because so said God, and that's what God wants it, to defy or to transcend the human logic. To them, that was the issue. They had no problem with Jews celebrating Pesach. They have their own holidays. Jews have their holidays. They mark their great events of history, no problem. But when a Jew tells a Greek, I have to eat exactly a kazayis of matzah, I always give the example, you sit down, we just had Thanksgiving in America, right? You go over to an American and say, tell me, how much turkey do you have to eat on Thanksgiving? How much? He doesn't even understand your question. The question doesn't make sense. How much turkey? Never thought of it. Whatever you want. You want to eat it, don't eat. The question is out of place. When you talk to a Jew, even a secular Jew, he asks, how much matzah do you have to eat on Pesach? He says, I have to check that out with my rabbi. It's a question. He understands the question, although it makes no sense if you think about it. There's no rationale. What are you eating matzah for? To commemorate the story of the Exodus. How much you have to eat to make a difference. But we're hung up on these things. By Yosef, you ate one speck less than an ounce, it's as if you didn't do the mitzvah. It doesn't count. And it's that way with almost all our mitzvahs. There's a certain super rationality to the mitzvahs that irked and threw the Greeks off balance. They couldn't stand it. They couldn't appreciate that. The Greeks, as you know, their culture worshipped the human body, the human intellect. That was the highest, right? The highest goal you can reach. The perfection of the human body and intellect. The minute you went out of the intellect, you attached yourself to something super rational. Beyond that, that's what they were fighting. That's what they were against. They didn't want to have Jews stop doing the mitzvahs that had some rationale behind them. They wanted to stop the Jews from doing the mitzvahs that had no rationale behind them. The chukim. The chukim are those mitzvahs that are super rational. You do it only because God said to do it. This is what they couldn't stand. We take it for granted. Of course, you have to eat a kazayis matzah. We learn every night the laws of washing your hands. Bring in a goy into these classes. And they just put them 1 hour to listen to a class like that. How you have to hold the washing vessel. And if it has a little hole in it on the top or on the side, it's no good. And depending where it is a hole. If under the hole there's a little V, the whole thing is so If you think about it, we got so used to learning this way, and used to this whole approach, but take a regular person and bring him in there and listen to this, he'll really think we're something's wrong with it. There's no rationale here. And there really isn't. If you think about it, but it's purely godly. This is what God wants, all based on God's will. That the human mind has a struggle with that. The Jewish people don't, because we stood at Sinai, and to us it's second nature. But the Greeks couldn't take it. They couldn't take it. They fought that, because it's not just that we were different. We represented a truth that they couldn't deal with, because it said that theirs is not. We were saying that the human mind is not the ultimate. Your rationale, your ability to comprehend, and whatever, you know that the Greeks produced the greatest, Aristotle, all these guys were all, the top level of human invention, human ability. That's what they worshipped. To them, that was the goal. That was it. The Jews came with a new idea. That's what they fought. Therefore, that's why, when the rabbis instituted the holiday of Chanukah, they did it in such a way that we should reflect that. What ended up happening? The Jews fought. Many Jews, became influenced by Greek culture and the Greek idea, Hellenized, and we had a big battle with them too. And I mentioned to you that in Dal Anisum we mentioned them too. I want to point that out when it says over here that I'm going to read this to you so that you understand it. It says over here, "But you in your bounding mercy stood by them, the Jews, in the time of their distress. You waged war, you waged their battles, defended their rights, and avenged the wrong done to them. Now, you delivered the mighty into the hands of the weak." That's a fascinating miracle. Beautiful. You would expect that the mighty would win over the weak, and here it was the opposite. We thank Hashem for that miracle. "You delivered the many into the hands of the few." That's also a great miracle. "You the impure into the hands of the pure." Who is this?
Jews against the Jews.
This is the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous. What's the miracle of that? Would you expect that the righteous should lose? Why would you expect the righteous should lose? And this was a great miracle that the righteous won. Why shouldn't the righteous win to begin with? There's this fight between righteous and wicked. The righteous should win. That should be the natural state. It's no big miracle here. The answer is that this is not talking about the Greeks. This is talking about the Hellenized Jews. Because they joined the Greek forces and fought Jew against Jew. This was a great threat. This was a great threat. And we thank Hashem for delivering them into the hands of the men. So when Jews fights against Jews and the right Jews win, because that makes things more complicated. Anyway, so that happened, and eventually the Jews won this war. Eventually the Jews won this war. Now, they want to celebrate this thing. How do you celebrate it? By making big parties, like you do on Purim. Purim, it's understood that you make a big party. You drink, you feed the body, because the body was threatened. But over here, the soul was threatened. Therefore, what do you do to celebrate the soul? When the soul wants to celebrate its miracle, you're going to feed it challah and fish. The soul is going to celebrate with challah and fish? Of course not. The soul is going to celebrate with soulful things. What in this physical world represents the most soulful thing? Candles. Candles. Light. It's the closest thing you have. It's the rabbis consider it the spiritual element in the physical world. Is light. Fire. Candles. It represents the soul. Neir Hashem Nishmas Odom. The candle of God is the soul of man. So when the soul wants to celebrate, you don't feed the soul chicken. The soul doesn't celebrate with chicken. The soul celebrates with candles, with spirituality. And the most spiritual, the physical thing that it represents spirituality the most is light, is candles. It says that light is the greatest, is the most obvious receptacle for God's Shekhinah. Yeah.
Is it just because that Hashem is wrapped in a shroud of light that kind of represents light and light itself? I mean,
What do you mean Hashem is wrapped in a shroud of light?
they say that Hashem is the light. kind of like, that's what I'm saying, like light matching light, so to speak.
Yeah. Hashem Erev Yishi. Oh, yeah, it's exactly right. Because God manifests himself in this world through light. It's the most spiritual of all physical, of the physical creation. That's the most closest, if you will. It's there. Now, but the question is, I get it. So that's why we celebrate with candles. The question is, at the end of the day, there was a miracle victory. It was a great miracle. The Jews were saved. It wasn't no game. It was a serious battle. The Jews fought the Greeks. They were going to kill them all out. Once they got involved in a war against them, so now the Greeks went all the way. At the beginning, they weren't interested in the body of the Jews. They didn't want to kill Jews. But once they saw that the Jews are not submitting to their rule and to their idea, and the Jews picked up arms, now it was all-out war. When it's all-out war, the threat is real that they're going to actually kill the Jews, and they wanted to. They were going to. And God made the miracle that the few overpowered the many, the weak overpowered the powerful. So in the Talmud, when it tells you what's Chanukah, and over what did they celebrate it, why doesn't it make mention, why don't we at least have something in the Gemara? It should say something about celebrating that victory. Nothing. It's not there. On the other hand, in the Al Nisim, it's just the opposite. The whole thing is about the victory of the war, but nothing about the candles. So what's going on here? Why is that? So the answer is because, as I mentioned, the victory of Chanukah was mainly a spiritual victory. Yes, it turned into a physical fight, a war, a battle, and so on. But what was the real issue here? Was, as I mentioned, the spiritual victory. Now, when you celebrate, when you want to mark a commemoration for the soul's victory, and at the same time you have a military victory, could you mix the two? The spiritual victory of the neshama, and what really with the battle over here, so dwarfs the physical threat that you can't even, it's not, they say, for example, when you take a candle outside into the daylight, broad daylight, in the middle of 12 o'clock in the afternoon, take a candle into the street, when the sun is shining in its full power, full might, you can appreciate the candle? Hardly. Shraga betira mai ahani. A candle in the light of the sun, what does it accomplish? Nothing. But this is even more than that. Because a candle outside, the candle is still there. If you look close, you can see it. It's not totally, it doesn't cease to exist because the sun is shining. It's still there. It's ineffective. It has no value. It doesn't do anything. But it's still there. In our case, when you're comparing spirituality, the super rational or the transcendent nature of God, which is what Torah Mitzvahs is, and then you're going to go and then at the same time you're going to celebrate, you're going to make mention in the same breath, oh, by the way, there was also another victory, I saved my marbles. I almost lost my marbles. Would you do that? It doesn't belong there. It doesn't belong in the same sentence. The physical victory doesn't mean we shouldn't celebrate it. But when you're talking about what is Chanukah, Chanukah is about otherworldly stuff. It's about the world of ideas. It's the world of the neshama, the world of God. The essence of Hashem was victorious. They wanted to destroy that, to kick God out of this world. That's what they wanted to do. So what are we going to do? Say in the same sentence, we saved God and we saved also the Jewish body. They don't fit in the same sentence. It's even worse than a candle in broad daylight. See, in other words, it doesn't belong in the sentence. Therefore, like this, when the Gemara says that this is a celebration of the spiritual victory. That's what it is. And that's what this celebration was made. This is why Chanukah was made. And only that is mentioned. Because when you're talking about that world, it's unbecoming to say, and also, by the way, we had this other victory. It's insignificant, so insignificant that it doesn't belong in the same sentence. However, the rabbis were, of course, not ready to totally disregard the victory of the war. That was a victory from our perspective. We certainly got saved from a terrible battle. So the rabbi said, you know what we're going to do? In the Al-Anisim, once a day or 3 times a day, we're going to mention that. And that's why they did not mention the miracle of the lights in that prayer. Because you can't mix the two. They're two different worlds. They're two different concepts. They're two different ideas. One is totally insignificant, nullified out of existence when you compare it to the ultimate. So the ultimate is the candles, of course. And that's why every night we light Chanukah candles. We don't make parties. We don't make these. I mean, today, Jewish women came up with they're very innovative. So, of course, we have latkes and we have donuts and all kinds of other beautiful things to add to the celebration of Chanukah. But what's my Chanukah? What is Chanukah? What's the essence of Chanukah? It's not the victory over the Greeks. It's the victory of God, of the neshama, of the soul. And when you're talking about that, there's no room, and it doesn't lend itself to a conversation about a victory of a war. It's just so incomparable that they don't belong in the same paragraph. That's why they completely separated the two things. In the Al-Anisim, we talk only about the war because that's important. It's not unimportant. On itself, it stands alone. It's an important thing. When you're comparing it to the larger victory, that's why they couldn't put both in both. The Al-Anisim, they put only the victory of the war, and that's why there's no mention of the candles. Because we're talking about an insignificant part of this miracle. Not insignificant from our perspective, of course. It's important. But when you're comparing it to the ultimate, this is small talk. So they put the small talk in the Al-Anisim. What's Chanukah? The real Chanukah? That's the story of the soul, the story of Hashem, the story of the super-rational victory over the Greeks, which was the battle of ideas. And that is celebrated by candles. And that's why, by the way, after you light candles, what do you light? What do you say after you light candles? Aneres Halol. These are the candles that we do. What's over there? There's not a mention about the victory over the war. It doesn't talk about the war. So you have both the Gemara and when we light the candles, talks about only the victory of the candles, only the victory of the light, the oil. It's a victory of the other world. It's a victory of other. It's beyond this physical reality. So you're going to mix into that victory. Also, by the way, we saved God we saved the godliness, and we also saved. It just doesn't fit. They have to be two separate ideas. One is the larger picture, and one is a victory of a war, which a normal human being must, according to Jewish law, thank Hashem when he has a physical victory. So we have to do this. We have to save Al-Anisim as well. But that's why it's not. The candles are not mentioned there. The miracle of the light was completely eliminated from Al-Anisim. So you have two separate victories. And what's the main victory, of course? The main celebration is, of course, the candles. So this Tuesday night, make sure that you have another Yid that you know that may not light candles. Make sure that they light candles. They start every night. Send them a kit. If you need, we'll give you. Make sure they have it. Go to a neighbor. Find a Yid. Make it your mission. Find one Yid to get them to light Chanukah candles this year, and you wouldn't believe what it does. It lights up the neshama. If you light a candle, that brings out the neshama. So go ahead and do that and have a happy Chanukah, and thank you for coming.